This is in continuation of the previous video where I talked about the process of transformation in Indian economy in the early modern period. So this early modern period is roughly late 17th and 18th centuries. So in continuation of this of that topic, in this video I'm talking about the continuous changes that were happening in Indian economy in the 18th century. So first thing is that already there was a storage of precious metal in India, even though by this time the companies that were present, they were using the money that they earned in India to buy the raw materials such as spices, cotton, rock, silk, etc. However, the Indian economy already had a massive storage of precious metal. That means even when the companies started financing themselves or started using their profit to buy raw materials rather than bringing bullion, but still India had a good reservoir of bullion and in this time. And also in this time we see that there were signs of decline of some already existing cities such as Surat that I have discussed in the previous previous video. But then there were some new places that were coming into existence. These were port cities and they actually accommodated artisans, merchants, of native origin as well as Europeans for commerce and for economic activities. So we see that there was a kind of growth in decline in some of the existing cities such as Delhi, Surat, Ahmedabad, but then there was emergence of new cities like Bombay and Madras and some other smaller ports. There was a kind of atrophy in the Mughal revenue system, but that did not influence the economy yet, as argued by historian C.A. Bailey. So, historian C.A. Bailey has done extensive work on Indian economy in the 18th, 19th centuries, and his works provides us plenty of information on the kind of networks that existed, the kind of communities, the patterns, the collaborations or competitions that existed between Indian and European merchants. So he argues that even though in the 18th century the Mughal Empire started declining, the important centers of Mughal economy like Surat, these started declining, and there was also a kind of drying up of their trading networks and also the sources of revenue. But still, the overall Indian economy did not see much of changes yet. Also, some new sources of revenue came up, and these new sources of revenue were in the form of cash crops. These were mainly indigo and opium. In many regions, especially in northern India, including Bihar, where indigo and opium were cultivated, and this actually became source of revenue. So even though some of the revenue sources died, some new sources came up. There was a decline in the participation of Indian merchants in commodities trade in this particular time, especially after 1760s. So in this time, after the Battle of Plassey and Battle of Buxar, we see that the Indian merchants lost some of their hold over commodities trade. That is because because of the decline in some of the commodities trade. Like for example, Bengal was a source of both raw cotton as well as textile. But in after the mid 18th century, Bengal started the export of textile declined and Bengal continued to export raw cotton. So the economy became kind of an export economy, and here Indian merchants lost some of their hold. And in this time the economy was also getting monetized. So what happened is that some of the merchants and artisans also became kind of peasant, and some of the so-called tribal communities also became peasant. And this peasantization is closely connected to monetized economy because the peasants started producing for the market and they started paying their revenue in rent, so they revenue in cash. So they started earning in cash and they also started paying revenue in cash. That led to monetization of the economy. And at the same time, the burden of wars and poor external trade had reduced impact on the economy, because on one hand we see that there were many rebellions that were happening within India, and also there were wars in Europe, especially between those companies that were active in India. But these had limited impact on Indian economy, internal economy, because the economy was getting monetized. However, C. Bailey argues that there were visible signs of a decline in urbanization and trade routes at pan-India level after 1707. So, despite the mixed signals or mixed signs that some of the trading places declined, some new trading places emerged, some of the merchants lost their occupation, some of the tribal groups lost their land for slash and burn agriculture, and they became agriculturalists or peasant, and they started earning in cash, and they started paying revenue in cash. So despite all these changes, overall the economy showed signs of decline in urbanization and decline in trade routes. Old cities such as Delhi, Dhaka, and Surat were depopulated, and new regional dynasties actually propelled some level of urbanization. So we see emergence of Bangalore and Hyderabad, and these cities emerged under indigenous rulers or under regional rulers, and under Europeans. Some other cities like Madras and Calcutta and Bombay emerged. So we see that new cities were emerging under guidance of indigenous rulers as well as Europeans. Overall, the 18th century was not an easy time, because plenty of changes were happening, and some of these changes were contradictory. Ruling elites, merchants, peasants, and artisans constantly adapted to the changes and grew at the expense of one another. So there were also constant competition amongst locals. So it was not simply the clash between locals and Europeans, but also amongst the locals there were constant competition for resources. So they would be victorious at the cost of another local group. In the early 19th century, the plantation economy became more common. So we see that along with opium and indigo, other cash crops started growing. Of these, some well-known are tea. Cotton also became a cash crop, a heavily planted cash crop. Sugar was another cash crop that started growing in this particular time. And then there were many forest resources, like many of the timber producing trees like pine, teak. These also were forested or planted in this particular time. However, the kind of capital that these plantations had to receive was very limited. So only after 1850s that capital started flowing into Indian industries from the metropolitan core. And here metropolitan core means cities like London or Manchester. And most of this capital that came into India in the 1850s were invested in plantations like tea or sugar plantations or cotton plantations. So C.A. Bailey has delved into the root cause of British India as not a developed plantation economy. So despite this limited investment that were made in the plantations, India's plantation economy was not as successful as Brazil's plantation economy, because Brazil had developed as a plantation economy in the 19th century based on rubber plantations. But in case of India, despite the presence of so many cash crops, Indian plantation economy was not a developed plantation economy in colonial time. So C.A. Bailey says that there were several reasons for that. One important reason was lack of investment, that the limited investment were only from mid-19th century. And when the cash crops were discovered, like tea was discovered in the 1820s, rubber was getting planted in the 1840s, 50s. So despite that, it was not receiving enough capital. So only investment that was made in this time was on the railways. Then another reason he has given is that the Europeans that were working in India, they were sending the money back to their homeland. So rather than investing their profit in India, they would send it to their homeland, which also led to a lack of resource or lack of capital for India. Then another reason given by Sir Bailey is that the racial boundary between Indians and Europeans remained prominent. So in other colonies, these racial boundaries were blurred by religious unity. So most of the colonized people and the colonists were Protestant. In case of India, the religions were different. That also led to kind of lack of understanding amongst the colonized people and the colonizers. And also the adaptability or acceptance of liberal economic model was not visible in India, or very limited, imperfectly adopted in India. So basically the teachings of laissez-faire or free trade, these were not adopted in India properly. So even though seemingly there was free trade in India, but in reality the Indian peasants or Indian merchants had limited opportunities to freely take part in the economic activities. Then other reasons why Indian plantation economy failed, or it failed to develop, were fragmented land holdings. Like, because India's population was increasing. In 1830s there was a global recession or global economic depression, but it did not affect Indian economy to a great extent, and India's population kept on growing. However, the land remained limited, so that led to fragmentation of land holdings, and this fragmentation of land holdings also led to decline in production. And then again, there was limited money for investment. Even the peasants did not have enough money to buy new bullock or new kind of tools and machineries for agriculture. And then the land rents that were there, these were high. So all of that led to a dwarfing of the Indian economy. And the East India Company acted as Indian merchant. So how they entered into India. Basically, when they entered into India, they acted as Indian merchants. So they did not act as foreigner in the beginning. They also took help of Indians like Dubasi or translators and financiers to penetrate into interior regions. The presence of indigenous capitalism that Sir Bailey has said, on one hand helped Europeans in establishing themselves in India, but on the other hand it also maintained the regional economies. So despite the presence of Europeans, regional economies remained present in India in colonial time, and that was because of the presence of indigenous capitalism. Thank you.